Nitro RC Nerds here, and I recently read online where this gentleman was having issues with his Savage brakes. They weren't stopping his Savage. And so his son took it to their local hobby shop, and he said that they fixed it. In fact, they fixed it so good, it was stopping at neutral. Now first, I didn't inquire, but I hope that his hobby shop did not charge them for adjusting the brakes. And I'll tell you guys, please, please, please do not pay people to do things like this. Do not pay your hobby shop to tune your engine or adjust your brakes or anything like that. If they're going to fix a broken part, that's fine. But if you have questions, certainly just reach out on this channel. If I don't know the answer, I'm sure that one of our subscribers will. But this is something that you can easily take care of yourself. And I don't fault him. I mean, this is something. It's not real intuitive. It took me a pretty good while to really understand link setups and brakes and throttles and things like that. So I figure one of two things happened. Either the local hobby shop did not correctly fix it, or something changed after it was fixed. So I told him, how about if I just throw up a video explaining how the brakes work on a Savage. And I do have another video that shows how to adjust Savage brakes, but I think it would really help a lot of folks to walk through the actual mechanics. And I also read online where another guy was told that he needed to get a high-tech servo to fix his brakes. And I hate to hear things like that because this poor guy, he would have spent $80 to $100 on a new throttle servo, would have had the same results. And you know why? Because as long as the servo itself is turning, it's not the servo affecting your brakes and the throttle. In fact, the servo that I have on here is slower and has less torque than the stock one. And it works fine. So then what does it have to do with? Two words: link setup. Yes, I understand that it's possible that brake discs can be worn, but it takes a lot to wear them down. And whether or not they're in good shape or bad shape, it's all a moot point if your link setup is not correct. So let's walk through how this works, and then I'll show you how to troubleshoot certain things. Now the link setup here for this Savage is different than buggies and truggies. In fact, it's very basic and almost crass, but it works. So an example, if you were to look at the link setup, let's say here on a buggy, you can see there's all sorts of different knobs and little things to help you find. So here would be another example of all the things you have to deal with on, say, a buggy or a truggy, where the Savage, it's bare bones. But like I said, it does the job. So here's what happens. When you apply throttle, you can see here, it's pulled out, and it's kind of hard to see, but your carburetor's opened. When you apply brakes, it goes in the opposite direction. And what's happening, as I just turn this off, there's a rod right here, and what this does is, if you follow it, it comes down over here to this cam thing down here, and it turns. Okay, so what you're doing here is you're turning this little thing down here, and when it turns, it's applying pressure on right through here on these brake pads. And what this does is it essentially applies force here on these brake discs, which then stops the drivetrain. So you can see you've actually got two wires that go to, or two rods, whatever you want to call them, that go to the servo horn. One right here is affecting your throttle, and then the second one, as I just noted, goes down and affects your brakes. The number one thing you really want to remember about this is that on your servo horn here, there's I don't really want to call it an actuator, but what it does is you can see it moves freely. See? So I can move this, and there's play. Why is that important? Well, what happens when you turn, when your throttle servo turns, what it's doing is it's essentially turning until you've designed it to where it's going to apply some torque, enough torque to move the rod. Now, how's that torque applied? Well, on the stock Savage, you're going to see, like, I believe there's a spring on here. Now, I've replaced it with fuel tubing. Why did I do that? Well, let's say that what's happening is it's turning, and it's still not applying the brakes. What you want to do is just get a piece of fuel tubing or something and make it a little bit longer, because the longer this piece of fuel tubing, if you think about it, the earlier that the torque will be applied. So if this fuel tubing went all the way out to here, as soon as I did that, boom, you could see this rod would move. Additionally, that's what this little thumb screw is on here for, because all this does is it shortens the rod. And it's, again, the whole effect is once this turns, when should the rod move, which in turn applies your brakes. So I could do like this. It's kind of, obviously it's difficult to do, but this, again, this, just imagine the servo's turning. You can see there's this play here when it turns, and then it eventually hit this, which forces it out. We'll go ahead and just roll this out, and I'll show you how it stops. See? I just put brake, and it stops. Now let's talk about a few different scenarios. Let's say that it's not stopping, because this is something I would say almost every Savage owner deals with at one point or another when they first get their truck. Let's say that it's not stopping, or it's coming to a very, very slow stop. Well, that's where you adjust this right here. And again, the very first thing I would do is replace the spring with fuel tubing and or screw this thumb screw in. So if you screw it clockwise, it's going to shorten it. The other thing you can do is if, again, your brakes are not applying like you believe they should, is down here you can unscrew this screw right here and move this rod down a little bit lower. Because once again, all you're doing is affecting the torque, if you will. The lower this is, the more this goes in. Of course, the important thing to do is if you make any modifications like this to tighten your brakes, make sure that at neutral they're not being applied. And the simple test for that is turn on your transmitter and your receiver and then just roll it back and forth and then apply the throttle and see if there's any change in resistance. If when applying the throttle you feel it kind of frees itself up a little bit, then you're dragging and you back things out a little bit. The nice part about this, once again, if you adjust it here, is you don't need to worry about your trim. You don't need to turn, you shouldn't use your, in my opinion, your trim for your throttle, your brakes. You should go right to the source itself. The trim is just for really, really fine tuning. So let's say that you've done all this and your brakes are still not working right and they're not being applied. Well, the next thing I would actually look at is travel. And what travel is simply is how far it should go in either direction, how far the servo should go. And I actually just had to do this the other day, and I don't know if someone, I don't know what happened, someone changed it or something, but what was happening is it was going only this far instead of that far. See? And there's a big difference. Again, I can't use both hands, but if it only goes out a little bit, it's not going to be applied very hard and it's still going to roll. But once it gets out further, it's going to change how far, how hard it's applied. And your travel is actually set inside of right here. And I think they take flathead screws. Let's say you've done all that and it's still not working. Well, that's when you want to take a look at your brakes, your brake pads, and your disc. The first thing I would recommend is tightening this up right here. There's a screw you can take. I've got a skid plate, so I have that in there. But you can tighten that up just a little bit. If that doesn't work, then yeah, you might want to look at cleaning your brake disc right there. So that's it. I really hope that this helps some people. Again, it's very simple, I think, once you kind of get your arms around how it's working. And just remember, the Savage it's very simple compared to like a buggy or a truggy. But as I've been saying all along in this video, it works and it works fine. You don't need a new servo, you don't need a new battery, you don't, any of that. You just need to properly adjust it. Thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to put them down below, and I'm sure myself or one of our subscribers will be happy to answer. Have a great day.